I would like to call now on stage Joshua Harvey to speak about, well, he says he will speak about something that is more of a provocation, right? About microscopes and telescopes. What's most useful? Joshua Harvey is an expert in social innovation and design. He founded and directed Very Green Grass, and in the past he worked for UNICEF and for CARE. Please go ahead.
That's my clicker. Hi, I'm Josh. In the past, I worked for UNICEF and CARE. I want to start with a very strange... Can you guys hear me okay? I thought I could walk around. I like to walk around when I talk, but I'll stay here. Yeah? Oh, awesome. Thank you. So, it's a strange title. General relativity, quantum mechanics, and the hard thing about social innovation. I promise it's not a talk about physics. I don't know anything about physics, so it'd be difficult to talk about it. And just a reminder, I'm Josh. It's not a talk about physics, it's actually a talk about a growing frustration I've had with my own practice as a social innovator, as a design thinking practitioner over the last 10 years. And what I think we might do about that, because it has implications for how we do our work. And it starts, as these things often do, with a sort of a personal epiphany. And it's a sad story. It is a sad story. I'm not making light of that. My wife and I experienced a miscarriage in November of last year. And that was obviously an incredibly difficult thing for us to go through, and I think, as far as these things go, it was very early. It was we could be okay, and a month later, we wake up to find that my wife is bleeding, and so we go to the hospital that we had gone to before, and we have a different doctor this time, and the doctor had a difficult time reading the chart from before, and we had to wait a long time for the machine we needed, the ultrasound we needed to get the scan. The nurse was inexperienced and poked my wife so many times that she passed out while trying to take blood. And even that, I think, would have been okay, except a month later, she was bleeding again. And a month later, she was bleeding again, and we were in the hospital again, and same experience again and again and again. Different doctors, different diagnoses, waiting and not knowing. And I could think, perhaps as part of my own therapizing, I don't think that's a word, my own therapy, I turned to some of the same tools that I would have used in my practice to try to understand what was going on, and that's design. And, I thought in a moment of hubris, I've worked on literally the largest health system strengthening in the world in Bihar, India, while working with CARE, using design to develop innovation strategy. I've worked, actually even the work that Francesca referred to before in Jordan, it was based on work that I've done. I've done big things, right? I felt like very egotistical. I thought like I can understand this. And I realized as I started talking to nurses and doctors that this challenge is incredibly complex. And the tools that I had did not give me the means, the language to approach the complexity of this situation. It wasn't about strictly what human-centered design would tell me, the experience, the pain points of my wife and I as we went through this process. It was about nurses that were burned out and doctors that weren't paid to do the procedures that they needed to be paid to do via insurance, and so on and so on and so forth. And so that's where the sad part of my presentation stops. And hopefully you can feel comfortable laughing at some of my bad jokes throughout the rest of it. So I said it's not a talk about physics, but it's a little bit of a talk about physics, because this experience, my inability to reconcile the individual experience of my wife with the large systemic challenges from whence this personal challenge came, reminded me of something from physics, and it's this. This is the universe. No, it's a very small part of the universe. But it's a picture of things that are enormous And we have a language in physics to describe enormous things and how they work, and it's general relativity. It's this idea that gravity is the response to the deformation of space-time via mass and energy being located in one place. You don't need to remember any of what I just said. Just remember again, we have a language to describe the very big. And in physics, we also have a language to describe the very small. Oh, I forgot to point, there it is. There it is. That's a quantum particle right there. That's a subatomic particle. Or actually, maybe it's here. When it comes to quantum things, sometimes you're uncertain. Does anyone get that joke? If the person next to you is laughing, they're very smart, I promise. And so we have a language to describe the very small, right? And we have a language to describe the very big. Now we can understand everything, right? We can connect the very small to the very big, except we can't. In fact, that is the problem in modern physics today. The greatest problem in modern physics today is our lack of a language to connect the very small and the very big. It's a punch in the gut, right? Actually, it's a punch, we would hope, in the gut, in the grand unified theory, a language that would fit between the very small and the very large. And that's the end of my talk about physics. But keep in mind this inability to connect the very small and the very large. Now, I'm a social innovation practitioner. I've worked for UNICEF and CARE, and I have my own consulting practice now called Very Greengrass. I use tools to understand the experiences of people and ideally work with them to build solutions. And the de facto tool right now, I think we can argue, if you're a social innovator, that you've never escaped this term, is human-centered design. And human-centered design is about understanding the experience of an individual in a very deep way. It is about empathizing profoundly with the individual. In fact, we say empathize with your user, like saying the mantra itself will get you to a solution. It's about understanding every component of their life, the ins and outs, right? Human-centered design is about the very small, right? It's the quantum particles of big systems. And that means that sometimes it's not the appropriate tool, as I found for, in my case, in the case of my wife, for understanding big systemic challenges. And it's in part, if we think for just a moment about where human-centered design comes from, and we need to be conscious of the lineage, the heritage of our tools, it's because it was not designed to help this young man think through problems of food deserts in urban centers in the US. It is because it was designed to help people do things like build a better coffee maker. It was designed by people that were, and I'll talk about this in just a moment, it was created as a practice, and we borrowed it from the private sector. It was designed by people who were not trying to do this, but trying to do this. This is an innovation firm that helped conceptualize a product that, I guess it clears your acne, but it doesn't, and they don't have to, right? This practice doesn't have to talk about the environmental factors that would have led to premature aging, or it doesn't talk about the stress that our lives, in our lives that would have led to this, or nutrition that might cause this problem in the first place, or perhaps most importantly, why this woman just doesn't feel beautiful as she is, right? Human-centered design doesn't necessarily lead us in the direction of those big systems, unless we think of it not as a window into our user's experience, but a door to step through and look at bigger systems. So what helps us look at those bigger systems? What language do we have to help describe the big things? Well, I'm a big fan of systems thinking, and I think increasingly in our space we're seeing people start to combine the two. Systems thinking is about understanding the very large. This is New York from a strange angle, right? That's Manhattan right there. Systems thinking is a tool that we use to look at large systems and start to see patterns emerge. And so we do have now some instruments in our toolkit to describe the very large. And I just want to say about human-centered design, I'm not a skeptic, I'm a practitioner. But it is as important to us as a hammer is to a carpenter. But I would be suspicious if a carpenter tried to use his hammer to paint a house, right? Some tools are good for some things, not for everything. And so we do have something in systems thinking that helps us talk about the very large, but right now we still lack a language, I believe, to move back and forth between the very small and the very large. Now, I want to leave you, perhaps most importantly, and I know this isn't a talk so much about what we do, right? I could talk a lot about the projects that I've been part of. Constance knows one of them, actually, from San Francisco. She probably doesn't want to talk about it. But it is, but rather I want to challenge us to think about how we might create that language between the two. And I do want to propose just one. And unfortunately, I don't have a ton of time to go into detail about what I think might be promising in this space in between. It's an ANT. Actually, it's ANT, or actor network theory, which is a very compelling way of helping us map ecosystems in their complexity and decompose or recompose parts of those systems. I can think now about our experience at that hospital in terms of the institutions and their momentum, in terms of the nurses and the doctors and the conditions that surround them. I can even think of our experience in the waiting room and the music that was playing, or how sterile everything smelled, right? That smell really sticks with you. Actor network theory, as I said, helps us begin to connect disparate experiences, and it helps us begin to pull them apart. I'm so sorry that I don't have the time to go into details about this. I think it's very exciting work. But I do think that it could be one means of giving us the language to connect the very large and the very small. That's going to leave us in a good place as social innovation practitioners. It might give us our grand unified theory. That's everything. Thank you.